Outcast Penguin here. Surprised? Yeah, me too. It's been over 5 years since I last made a video, and honestly, I never had any intention of getting back to it. Turns out, video editing is a long and difficult process, and it's not one I really enjoy doing. Add to that the fact that I am poor and can't really afford to hire someone, and I really started to believe that my YouTube career was basically a pipe dream.
Oh, no.
And yeah, as of right now, that's probably still the case. Don't expect a video every week or anything like I used to do, but now that 2 new Zelda releases have come out since my last video, and with the new theorizing potential that they bring, I've had a couple of ideas percolating in the old noggin. And while discussing them with friends and loved ones, I was told by my brother Spencer that I needed to make at least one more video, and that he would do the editing if I just wrote the script. So yeah, thanks man. It was the push I needed to get this one out there. So if everyone would be willing to leave a comment to thank the editor, that would be greatly appreciated. It really is because of him that this video was even given a chance in the first place.
I mean it. I don't know what to say. That means the most to me.
That said, I don't know if this is going to continue to be a thing. We're going to go all out with this one, which is important because I feel like the community really needs this at the moment. But even with that being the case, I have no reason to presume, while I'm writing this script anyways, that my current editor Spencer will enjoy editing these videos any more than I did. So it may still be a while before a potential next video, about the existence of which I will also make no promises. Okay, that's enough waffling. Today's theory is actually not an original Outcast Penguin idea. It was developed by a fellow YouTube channel named Gambagoons. It's a really good video and theory, and honestly, I'm kinda surprised it hasn't made its way through the Zelda community yet. The video has a good number of views, sure, but none of the major channels have discussed the theory, and that is rough, because I feel like it clears up a lot of the problems that people have with both Tears of the Kingdom and the series as a whole. That said, I guess I can see it from a couple of different perspectives. I think a big part of the reason for why people may take issue with the theory is that it sort of conflicts with statements made and visuals presented by Nintendo themselves.
I'm stupid! I'm stupid!
Yeah, that's, yeah. This theory essentially retcons the timeline as we know it, and Nintendo themselves have not made major changes to the timeline in the way that this new timeline has, so there is that. We'll talk about it. On a less problematic note, however, it's also possible that not a lot of creators have seen this video yet. A few 100,000 views is way more than I've ever gotten, but it's not on the level of someone like the Game Theorists or Zeltic. But the biggest reason for me, and one that I intend to fix with this video, is a lack of supporting evidence. Theories are great if they make sense, but if y'all remember my spoof video, I am personally of the belief that theories are at their best when they are supported by what is present, and not when they are only intended to fill in gaps. Gambagoons did a great job of making a believable and indeed surprisingly predictive theory about what is taking place in the Zelda timeline, but he missed the opportunity to mention a lot of the potential supporting evidence that this is not only possible, but maybe even intentional by a member of the team that laid out Tears of the Kingdom from a storytelling perspective. But to discuss this topic, we need to lay a foundation of important terminology first. The most important term that we need to know is the term retcon. Retconning is a writing practice whereby the continuity of a story can be changed and altered after the fact, not by rewriting the old, but by changing its context with the new. Nintendo is not new to the concept of retconning, and indeed, they do it somewhat regularly. A classic example of this is the Master Sword's origin story. Gambagoons himself brings up that the origin of the Master Sword is set up in A Link to the Past as a weapon made specifically to oppose Ganon, but Skyward Sword shows that it was instead made to battle Demise.
You liar!
This isn't the only time the origin of the Master Sword is changed either, as it was also retconned in Wind Waker, and it may have even been updated in Echoes of Wisdom, though that's a theory for another day. The origin of the Master Sword was vague and mysterious in older titles, and thus mentions of its origins were sparse and sometimes self-conflicting. Comments by Ganondorf in the Wind Waker seem to imply that he knew, quote, the fools that forged that blade. And yet, it existed well before Ganondorf did, as seen not only in Skyward Sword, but also in Ocarina of Time, where the sword already has a legendary status and is sealed away in a temple of Gothic construction. I've done some research on medieval architecture, and Gothic cathedrals took literally hundreds of years to complete, so the Temple of Time, even without the context of Skyward Sword, must have been made at least several decades before Ganondorf was ever born. And as it was clearly made with the Master Sword's resting place in mind, it's not a jump to assume that the Master Sword was forged long before Ganondorf was even born. And Skyward Sword takes this into account when it sets up its own origin story of the Master Sword. This retroactively changes the way people thought of the entire series at the time, and thus it was a retroactive continuity change, or retcon. Now that we know what a retcon is, we can move on to why retconning is important to today's theory. This theory states that Tears of the Kingdom retcons the entire Zelda series, repositioning the Downfall timeline to split off from Skyward Sword, rather than being a what-if scenario that separates from Ocarina of Time's two canonical timelines if Link fails. Now, this is a controversial stance, and trust me, I get it. We've had the timeline for a long time now, and Ocarina of Time was undeniably made as a prequel to A Link to the Past. To suggest that the timeline has changed goes against Nintendo's official timeline visuals and removes the connection between these two foundational titles. It's not a stretch to say that this would run against the grain for most people. And yet, not only do I think that this retcon is possible, I think it might fix everything people think is wrong with the series in its current form. Too much evidence supports it in Tears of the Kingdom to be completely off base. But is it even right to go against the official canon at all? Does it invalidate the theory? Well, according to Nintendo, no, it doesn't.
No!
I think it's important to address Nintendo's stance. Nintendo's official placement of Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild is hazy. It's at the end, but how does it connect? We don't really know. This has ticked off a lot of people, but I'm not included in that group. Their statement, as told by Hidemaru Fujibayashi, is as follows. We realize that fans have a great time theorizing and enjoy thinking about where things fit on the timeline. That's something that the development team recognizes and it considers, but to an extent. I say to an extent because if we get too into the weeds or too detailed in the placement, it results in kind of creating restraints for our creativity. The process of creating new ideas becomes restricted because we're so tied up and trying to make things fit into a very specific spot on the timeline. We do consider it, but not to an extent where it feels that our development process feels restricted or constrained. Now, this seems to many as a way of basically saying that the timeline essentially doesn't matter, and yeah, that reading makes a lot of sense. Heck, this interview addresses and discredits the theory that will be presented here today. But stay tuned, we are going to clear it up. After all, InGame Evidence and indeed other statements from this very interview put forth different stances on the subject. Fujibayashi, when asked about the parallels between Tears of the Kingdom's past and Ocarina of Time, and the potential for them being parallel retellings of the same events, which we'll discuss in a bit, says, "We understand that fans have theories, and that's a fun thing to do for fans. We also think about what kind of theories fans may come up with when given what we create. It's not like we're trying to plan ahead for those theories, but in the series there's this idea of reincarnation, that Zelda and Link, as they appear in different titles, they're not the same person per se, but there's sort of this fundamental soul that carries on. Because of that, certain scenes may turn out similar. Like you were saying, the antagonist kneeling before the king. Those scenes might turn out that way because they are sort of like glimpses or representations of the soul of the series. For people to pick up on that and see that, it's something that we enjoy, and it kind of helps create this myth of the Legend of Zelda. Now, this confirms that the Zelda team was not intentionally retconning the timeline, but I want to draw attention to the last line in the statement. He says, and I quote, it kind of helps create this myth of the Legend of Zelda. In other words, the timeline is not unimportant, even if it is for fan consideration over the team's consideration. It is true that it is considered by the fans more than it is by the team, but it is, by the admission of the team lead, the role of the fans to flesh out these theories. And this is, again by his admission, what allows us, the fans, to take part in the creation of the lore. Let me say that again. He is literally saying that the fans are just as responsible for the series lore as Nintendo is.
By Jove, he's got it.
That may sound odd and unintuitive, but it is absolutely in line with Nintendo's philosophy regarding the series. I will now quote a statement that for years has accompanied the official timeline. After the creation of Triforce Heroes, Nintendo re-released the timeline, and if you're looking, you will see this line way down at the bottom in the fine print. Attentive readers may note that the timeline shown here differs slightly from the one found in Hyrule Historia. The timeline can be interpreted in a number of ways, and may change depending on new discoveries that have come to light, and on the player's imagination. This is an official Nintendo statement that literally says, hey, we can change the timeline however we want, and we will do so if it makes sense to us and if it makes sense to you. They are essentially telling us that they want us to continue theorizing, and that they may retcon the lore if the theories are good enough to justify it. So I'm sure you're wondering then, if they want us to fill out the timeline, why the ambiguous timeline placement of the Wild Era games? And why the statements that they don't consider it too much themselves? Well, for my part, I think that they're trying to go back to pre-2011. Before the Hyrule Historia, the timeline was ambiguous, and a lot of people were trying to make sense of it. As someone in the fandom back then, it was actually a lot of fun. Trying to find out how it worked was a challenge, and ever since Skyward Sword, we've been working on making sense of what Nintendo has provided us. But be honest, how many timeline theories were there on the placement of either Skyward Sword or A Link Between Worlds? Not a lot. The unambiguous nature of the timeline for this short window forced theorists to look elsewhere for theories. At some point, Nintendo noticed that, and I think that's why Tears of the Kingdom has made things ambiguous again. They want to see us work for it because they know that we enjoy doing it. Some people are mad that they don't care anymore, but they are literally telling us that they care more about our enjoyment of the theorizing than they do about maintaining strict control over their own continuity. They want us to have fun in-game and out of game, and laying it all out takes some of that fun away. Leaving it open allows us to fill in the gaps and make something more than they or us could ever do alone. They want creativity on their end, and they want to inspire creativity on ours. So,
come on guys, let's get creative!
open your mind. Embrace the role of a creative individual with me, and think of the Zelda chronology, not for what you know it to be, but for what it could be with the new evidences that I will provide. And let's see if we can make a convincing retcon of the Zelda timeline for the first time ever, and have it really, well and truly, make sense. The very first scene of Tears of the Kingdom is of Zelda and Link discovering ancient reliefs of what Zelda immediately tells us is the Imprisoning War. I should not have to tell you what that means. Avid fans of this series know the Imprisoning War is the war that set the stage for the events of A Link to the Past. For years we believed that the Imprisoning War started in and ended shortly after Ocarina of Time, when Ganondorf was sealed away by the sages. But if we reevaluate the timeline as we know it, and if we take this statement at face value, the Imprisoning War is now no longer tied to Ocarina of Time. Instead, its events are now being told in Tears of the Kingdom. We still need evidence to support this though, so let's take a look at what we have. If we are to assume that the Imprisoning War as described in A Link to the Past was once the events of Ocarina of Time, but is now the events of Tears of the Kingdom's past era, we should see certain parallels between these three games. Namely, there must be a Ganondorf who must try to steal by force the golden power of the Triforce, and after a long conflict, he must be sealed away by the sages in the Sacred Realm, a land fated to become the Dark World. On face value, much of this happens, but some of it does not seem to, at least not on screen. The power that Ganondorf seeks in Tears of the Kingdom is not shown to be the Triforce. As a matter of fact, outside of artistic depictions of the royal family's crest, the Triforce is practically absent in the Wild Era. In addition to this, Ganondorf is sealed away in the depths below Hyrule Castle, not in a separate dimension called the Sacred Realm. Everything else seems to line up, but these two conflicting pieces of evidence are currently holes in the theory. So, can we fill those holes? Maybe. The first hole will need more evidence to fill it, and if we're lucky, we may get more information when the new Hyrule Warriors game, Age of Imprisonment, Age of Imprisonment comes out later this year. But in case we don't get the lore drops that we're hoping for, I will still make my case for it anyways. The only place we see the Triforce during? Did I write that?
Freaking idiot!
During the Wild Era that is not artistic in nature is when Zelda seals away Calamity Ganon at the end of Breath of the Wild. We don't know if this is a power of the Triforce of Wisdom, a power of the full Triforce, or simply a sign of Zelda's godly authority as the reincarnation of Hylia. Perhaps the sealing power, described in Tears of the Kingdom as a mix of Sonia and Raru's light and time powers, is granted to her by the influence of the Triforce itself, passed down in the royal bloodline just as the Triforce of Courage is passed to Twilight Princess Link, likely through his bloodline. Perhaps at the beginning of this timeline, the Zonai have found a way to harness the full power of the Triforce in body, just like Link, Zelda, and Ganondorf are able to harness their respective pieces of it. And this is what gives them the abilities that we see in-game. Notice that Raru wears Triforce imagery on his coat, and he uses golden energy to defend the kingdom against the Molduga, which he conjured by making the shape of a triangle with his hands, just like Zelda does at the end of Ocarina of Time. It's not even a jump to consider that the Triforce might be able to be wielded by someone other than Zelda, Link, and Ganon, as we literally see this in Echoes of Wisdom when Null absorbs the Triforce of Power. Is it perhaps possible that even the Sacred Stones are a manifestation of the Triforce's power, channeled through Raru and given to the sages of the Imprisoning War? It's not definitive to be sure, but given the ambiguous visual hints, it's certainly not out of the question. If we assume that this is the case, then the war fought by Ganondorf and the tribes of Hyrule would indeed be a war fought to control that sacred golden power. Again, we will have to see if this is the case when Age of Imprisonment comes out, but if it doesn't get brought up, that doesn't necessarily disprove anything. After all, a lack of evidence is not evidence of a lack. Next, the mentions of the Dark World and the Sacred Realm. This one is actually easier to rectify than you might think at first. The depths in many ways parallel the overworld map of Tears of the Kingdom, and this was absolutely intentional. The depths literally mirror the topography of Hyrule from above, going so far as to make low places high and high places low. It is a visual copy of the world above, but filled with strange trees with blue leaves and corrupted life. This land, once home to the Zonai, a people revered as gods, has been sucked dry of its sacred power, leaving the world dark and almost lifeless. Is it possible that this place is literally the same exact location as the Dark World of A Link to the Past, twisted even further by Ganon's influence? I mean, it is still very visually distinct from the Dark World. The Dark World is much brighter, ironically, and it doesn't appear to be all underground. But much of the depths has a roof that's covered by thick fog, and with the light being lost over the course of centuries, it's possible that the roof of the cave once appeared like the skies above the Dark World, but with clouds of thick fog interrupting the light and hiding the roof that at that time we couldn't see. As a matter of fact, if you look at this image of the Sacred Realm used in the booklet of A Link to the Past, it makes it appear as though amidst a sea of clouds below and under what appears to be the earth above. There, sitting betwixt them, is the Triforce on scattered outcroppings of stone. Notice how it gets darker the further back you look in the image. If this was planned to be in a massive underground space from the start, I would honestly be surprised, yeah. But you can see how easy it would be for the team, and indeed the fans, to reinterpret this image that way. Surely this image wasn't made to look like the depths, but it's not hard to interpret the depths as being somewhat based on this image. The earth above and the skies below could be represented by the inverted topography, with high now low and low now high, and the fading darkness in the background is reminiscent of the depths in its lit up state. The earth above the image could also be a part of why they made the Tears of the Kingdom dark world in the underground, where the earth can now be seen overhead. Add to that the fact that this was once the land of the Zonai, and has since become a world of darkness after the Imprisoning War, and the parallels are pretty hard to ignore. Okay, so now that we have those two holes filled, we can see that the Imprisoning War of Tears of the Kingdom lines up with the Imprisoning War of A Link to the Past just about as well as Ocarina of Time does. But if this is now where Ocarina of Time once was, then what happens to Ocarina of Time? Well, that's pretty easy. Let's look at InGame Evidence once again to find out where this fits in the new timeline. Zelda travels back to this time early in the game and is told by Rauru that she is in the era of Hyrule's founding. This seems to contradict previous information in the series, but remember, we're talking about a retcon here, so let's take him at his word. I know that Nintendo has said maybe this isn't the first time Hyrule was formed, and so that statement just means that it's the first time he knows of it, but they say maybe, and Rauru doesn't, so let's take him at face value. If Rauru is the first king of Hyrule, what does that mean? Well, it means that there wasn't a kingdom here before him.
Well, duh.
That places the past of Tears of the Kingdom cleanly after Skyward Sword. At this time, neither Rauru nor Sonia have heard the name of Zelda, but if they named the land Hyrule, then they must have heard of the name Hylia. Would this make sense if the game took place after Skyward Sword? Well, that depends. Which timeline are they on? You see, Demise is stopped 2 times in Skyward Sword. Once when Link wishes on the Triforce and destroys the imprisoned in the current timeline, and one when Link seals him in the Master Sword at the end of the game in the past timeline. Arguments may be made that there is no timeline split here, but such accusations rely on a lack of implicit evidence that such a thing has happened. The claim is that a timeline split is inconsistent with how Skyward Sword ends, but this is easy to clear away. It's time for more terminology. We have 3 new terms that we need to understand how time travel works in Zelda games. The first is what I will refer to as Dragon Ball time or branching time. The second is what we will call bootstrap time or causal time, and the third is what I will call McFly time or corrective time. These 3 methods of writing time travel outline all theoretical possibilities for how time travel might work in a fictional world. Branching time is what we see in Dragon Ball, when Trunks comes back from the future. He warns the Z Fighters to prepare for the androids, and they do. And after a whole lot of stuff happens, this ultimately saves the day and alters the course of events, but it has no effect on the timeline from which Trunks came. This is called branching time because one history creates 2 branching paths. One where, in this example, the Z Fighters all survive, except for Goku, and one where the androids destroy all of humanity, until Trunks, who is now stronger, is able to stop them. And then he loses to Cell, and there's actually technically one more timeline where Trunks, who's now prepared, gets to Cell before Cell gets Trunks. It's a whole thing. Anyway, sorry. 3 timelines are created by the acts of 2 different time travelers, all affected by their own pasts, but not by the pasts of other branches. This is seen in the Zelda series when at the end of Ocarina of Time, a new timeline is made as Zelda sends Link back in time to live his life as a child. The future where Link defeated Ganon as an adult still exists, and it's shown in the end credits. But the past now follows a different course, where Link warns the King of Hyrule and Ganondorf is stopped and executed at the Arbiter's grounds. Well, almost. The next time travel method, causal time travel, is seen in a novella called By His Bootstraps, which neither I nor probably you have ever read, but that's a common name, so we'll stick with it. A more well-known example of it is in the movie Interstellar, where a man caught in a black hole is able to see the dimensions of time as a single viewable space. He sets in motion his own path to becoming an astronaut by sending a message to himself in the past. It's called causal time travel because the events that take place in the past are caused by the events of the future, and the events of the future are likewise caused by the past, which begs the question about how any of this came to be in the first place. Importantly though, with causal time, there is only one timeline, in which changing events in the past changes neither the past nor the future, but instead becomes the stepping stones to the future that you already came from. An example of this from the Zelda series is in the Windmill Hut sequence of Ocarina of Time. We can see the first time that Link gets to Kakariko Village as an adult, and the well is already empty by that point. Eventually we find out that Link already emptied it as a child, and using this knowledge, we learn the song, Go Back in Time and Empty the Well. But if Link as an adult learned the song to empty the well because he did it as a kid, and he was only able to empty the well as a kid because he learned it as an adult, then which event came first? And if it wasn't truly either, then how did any of this happen at all? It kind of becomes a chicken and the egg type situation, which is only possible if the past, present, and future are in some way predetermined. Regardless, there is one timeline, and that timeline does not change. The final form of time travel is corrective time, which we see in the movie Back to the Future. This movie sees its main character, Marty McFly, go back in time where he meets his parents in the past. After influencing their lives in such a way that certain events no longer happen, and new events happen in their place, the timeline corrects itself, and he finds himself in the future with the same family in his own time, but living in very different circumstances. This is called corrective time for that very reason. There is only one timeline, but it corrects itself as the past changes. This is seen in Zelda when you plant the life tree seedling in the sealed temple of Skyward Sword. Despite the tree never being here before, Groose acts like it's always been here and has in fact long been one of his favorite parts of the temple. His memories change as you change the past. So what does all this have to do with Five Nights at Freddy's? Sorry, Tears of the Kingdom. What does this have to do with Tears of the Kingdom? Quite a bit actually, but first let's go back to Skyward Sword. At the end of the game, we see that one singular instance of time travel creates both a causal loop as well as a corrective timeline. When you travel to the past and save Zelda, you leave the Master Sword and Fi with it in the past, and Zelda leaves Impa one of her bracelets. The Master Sword, which hasn't been there all game long, now sits there like it has been there the whole time. Meanwhile, the old lady is revealed to be Impa, who, since you first met her, has been wearing the bracelet that you left behind. The bracelet implies that the events of the past have already happened for Impa in a causal loop, and yet, if they had, Demise would have been in the Master Sword all game long, not in the Sealing Grounds. In short, this one instance of time travel has verifiably and visually operated in two different and conflicting ways. Now, this might not be that big of an issue, simply because Zelda isn't operating on scientific time travel logic, it's operating on magic logic, which is to say no logic at all. If the magic is fixing timelines, then it doesn't have to be consistent with itself as long as you, as the viewer, don't think about it too hard. That said, it isn't just two forms of time travel present here, it's actually clearly, though not obviously, three. The final piece of evidence comes only after the credits have rolled, and it is the least obvious of the three. Groose's buddies and the headmaster fly down on their loft wings to meet the others on the surface. Colin can be seen here reacting to the little birds in a way that is clearly reminiscent of how Groose reacted when he first landed down. This is his first time seeing these small birds, which means that this version of Colin must not have come down to the surface. But why not? Obviously, for us, the reason would be the cloud barrier's existence, a barrier that was made by the goddess Hylia to separate her people from Demise's influence. But if Demise has been gone all of these many millennia, then there would have been no cloud barrier for all of that time. So this evidence actually opposes this being a corrective timeline, and since we've all played the game and Demise was there the whole time in the Sealing Stone, it wasn't a causal loop either. Colin and the others are acting exactly how we would expect them to if they were in the same timeline as they had always been, with no changes. This implies the existence of two timelines, one where Girahim kidnapped Zelda at the beginning of the game, and one where both he and Demise were stopped by Link in the past. This points to there being 3 different methods and modes of time travel, all stemming from this one instance of Link going to the past. And if we are to assume that this is true, then it actually begins to describe a lot of things about this series. First off, if these are now 2 separate timelines, it explains how Rauru can be the first king of Hyrule when we would have expected it to be Zelda who founded the kingdom. It also explains why they don't have the name Zelda in this timeline, but that they do know the name Hylia. In the main timeline, Hyrule is founded by Zelda and the other inhabitants of Skyloft when they settled down on the surface. They started a tradition whereby the princesses would be named Zelda after the reincarnated goddess who founded the nation. And, with that name being more common, the name Hylia would fade into obscurity. In the past timeline, however, it was only seen that Hylia stopped Demise the first time and Link did so the second time. The only ones who would know to call her Zelda were the ones from the future and Impa herself. The people of Skyloft would have never even heard of Zelda, but they would know of Hylia, who sent them skyward on the islands above the clouds. Thus, when they came down, they would still name the land after her, but they wouldn't have a tradition of naming their leaders after Zelda, and they also wouldn't have a central figure living with them to take up the title of royalty. After all, Hylia in this world is a goddess, and not a mortal living in the mortal realm. Even if Skyward Sword Zelda were to be born in this timeline, she wouldn't be recognized as the reincarnation of the goddess since no one kidnapped her. Thus, when the events of the Ocarina of Time game, I sound like Nintendo.
Yes, can I speak to him, please? It's urgent. Hello? Yeah. He did it again. Get up.
Thus, when the events of Ocarina of Time were finally about to come to pass in this new past timeline, the Sage of Light, a man by the name of Rauru, would instead be the most godly figure on Earth. Revered as a godlike entity and given a noble title, he founded the kingdom and named it after the goddess who stopped the Demon King. But when a man named Ganondorf emerged from the desert and sought the power of these godlike beings, he was thwarted and feigned fealty to the crown of Hyrule. Though Zelda was wary of him, the King of Hyrule allowed Ganondorf to move his plot along. And can I just say, is that not Ocarina of Time? Like, that is plot, like beat for beat, that's Ocarina of Time. When the Zelda of Tears of the Kingdom aided Hyrule, she became a central figure in the Imprisoning War, and perhaps as a method to ensure her existence, the next leader of Hyrule after Rauru and Sonia wrote it into law that future princesses would be named Zelda. And, at her advice, they prepared the kingdom to look for and aid a hero named Link, who would come to stop Ganon when the time was right. And it's a good thing that she did that, because both Link and Ganon would arrive much sooner than expected. Avatars of Ganondorf's power arose time and time again to bring calamities upon the people of Hyrule, but a hero always rose up to stop them. And as though preordained, that hero, time after time, bore the same name as an unsung hero of old and a prophesied hero to be. All the while, another figure named Ganondorf never came to be, and as centuries became millennia, only the name Ganon was remembered, eventually less a person than a force of nature. And yet, from the beginning of the kingdom to the end, the incarnation of Demise's vengeance remained deep within the depths of the Dark World, patiently waiting for his chance to break free of the seal, and for the first time, wage war on 2 individuals who had thwarted his attempted return, not just once, but always. And in the other timeline, Zelda and Link would be lauded as the heroes who saved Skyloft, and the name Hylia faded into history, with tales of the Demon King gone. For Demise was not sealed in this time, but was instead destroyed. That said, it wasn't going to be sunshine and rainbows in this timeline either. For though his connection to a demon lord of old was not extant in this iteration, an ambitious and wicked king still sought that golden power that would make him ruler of everything beneath the sky. Honestly, with them dropping names like Rauru in Tears of the Kingdom, and with visuals of Ganondorf that look like Demise in Tears of the Kingdom, not to mention the goddess statues only found in the Downfall timeline, and even some neat game file things, like these two in this scene being Kotake and Kaume, I seriously feel like this theory holds a heck of a lot more water than a bunch of other Hui.
Rat patootie.
There really are so many parallels, even just down to the plot. Like, I really struggle to imagine that this was accidental. Maybe someone on the Zelda story writers team snuck all this in, like some absolute mad lad, intentionally leaving it for us as a trail to find. After all, if it's true, it not only expounds on the lore, but even allows the former Downfall timeline to exist in complete parallel harmony with the other two timelines. So that was a heck of a lot. Let's make it digestible. The theory in short claims that Skyward Sword split the Zelda timeline just like Ocarina of Time did, and that the two timelines that emerged were the canonical timelines after Ocarina of Time and the Downfall timeline, now running right alongside Ocarina of Time and its two follow-up timelines. No need for a what-if scenario, and no weird contradictions. Pretty cool, right? Thank you to my 17 subscribers and anyone new clicking on this video. I hope to see you when I get around to making the next one. I already have a plan for it, but we'll see how things go on the editor side. Until then though, this is Outcast Penguin signing off.